Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. My name's Rohan. I'm a third year medical student studying at Cambridge University. Today we're going to be getting down into the nitty-gritty of the EPQ. In this video, we'll cover the importance of the title progression and how to approach the research process. Just a quick note, I've actually put my project in a Google Drive folder in the description box below for you to check out, just to see what a finished essay and production log looks like. Just be aware that this is only a guide and it is copyrighted material, so please don't plagiarise. Anyway, let's dive in because we have a lot to cover. So starting with the title progression, this is absolutely essential in the EPQ because it really does set the direction for which the project will take, and it explicitly states this in the mark scheme. There's actually a document which has been released by Edexcel which outlines what makes a good title, so I'll link that down below. Basically, you first want to brainstorm potential areas of interest which your project could be based around. Now, a lot of us won't have very specific interests which immediately spring to mind, and that was certainly the case for me. So it's important that we expose ourselves to as many new and interesting material as possible. We can do this by reading around the subject, so for example, reading books, listening to podcasts, reading news articles or blogs, watching documentaries, that type of thing. All you're looking for is a spark which you can use as a springboard to further research. For example, my inspiration came when I was reading an article in the Biological Sciences Review about angiogenesis, which is the process of creating new blood vessels from pre-existing ones. In particular, I was drawn to this small text box which talked about how cancer can manipulate the process of angiogenesis to hijack our blood supply and obtain nutrients to fuel its growth. It was this which led me down a path of research about anti-angiogenic therapeutics. And basically, you just want to collate as many of these sparks as you come across in your reading, and then you can put them in your record of initial ideas in the production log. These initial titles that you come up with do not have to be related, or they could be variations on a similar theme. Then, after doing preliminary research on each of your potential sparks, you can pick the title which most interests you, or which you think will be easiest to research and write your project about. This is settling on your working title, because as you do further research, you will then refine your title. So it will change going forward. When you are choosing your title, I highly recommend phrasing it as a question or hypothesis. This will allow you to get AO3 marks, which forms 40% of your EPQ, and is basically your ability to develop ideas by synthesizing information from different places and adding your own original insights. For example, for my project, if I had just had the title, The Role of Anti-Angiogenics in the Treatment of Uveal Melanoma, that would only really allow me to describe. It's really hard to get any original thoughts or analysis into this title. However, by having a title, How Relevant Are Anti-Angiogenics in the Treatment of Uveal Melanoma? This allowed me to assess the pros and cons of the treatment, and it's sufficiently open that I can explore different use cases of these drugs and basically form a two-sided argument. Another way you could encourage analysis in your title is by using the phrase "to what extent." So basically, in a nutshell, your title shouldn't just be answerable by a simple yes/no answer, but it should encourage you to evaluate and settle on a more subtle conclusion. Another thing which typically happens in title progression is that we narrow the scope of the project. This is because when we're initially researching, we're optimizing for breadth of ideas and inspiration rather than depth. However, if we are realistically going to answer a research question or hypothesis that is above A-level standard, then we need to pick a more niche or narrow topic area so that we can feasibly fit it in 5,000 words. For example, my initial working title was Are Anti-Angiogenic Therapeutics a Viable Way of Treating Cancer Metastasis in Patients? This is way too broad, so my supervisor suggested that I choose one specific cancer to research. And I think this is a good rule of thumb if you're doing a medically related EPQ, and that's to try pick a specific subtype of a disease. For example, instead of doing something on diabetes, which represents a huge range of pathologies, you could pick a subtype of type 2 diabetes, like gestational diabetes, for example. Okay, so to summarize this section, you want to progress your title by allowing evaluation in the way that you phrase the title, and you most probably have to narrow the scope of the title, so you can do something good within 5,000 words. Now let's talk about actually doing the research for your project. Research. It's a scary word, but I like to think of it as gathering relevant facts or information or ideas into pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Then when you're writing your project, or anything for that matter, you arrange these pieces in a logical way to spin your own unique narrative on the topic. I have a different approach to research than most. Many people you'll hear will say,
"Wait, don't use Wikipedia, it's not reliable. Use Google Scholar or JSTOR."
Okay, maybe I was being a bit harsh there. They do have a point that the quality of information is generally higher in peer-reviewed journals. But as a side note, there are some sources which suggest that Wiki is as accurate as the Britannica Encyclopedia. So that's interesting. Anyway, when you start your research, you're not interested in the little details straight away. You want to get a bird's eye picture on the topic first, so then you can pick out what journal articles are most relevant for you later on. Not to mention that these more academic sources can sometimes be quite hard to understand, particularly if we don't have any background in the field. So I think it's vital to start a bit broader and simpler. For example, in my project, I started off by watching a bunch of YouTube videos with this guy drawing out and explaining the process of angiogenesis in a simple way. Then I read an interview on some website which explained how angiogenesis was discovered, again in a very simple way. This helped me get a good grounding on the material before looking at any journal articles on PubMed, and it helped give me a direction of where I wanted to take the project. Another underrated way to help start your research is just to ask for help. So you could ask your supervisor for ideas where to start with research, but I also emailed some experts in the field just to ask them for some guidance. For example, I reached out to that guy who wrote that article which initially sparked my interest in angiogenesis. I recommend doing the bulk of research before you start writing your project. This is because as you research, you'll often uncover more potential areas of content, and you may also find material which challenge your preconceived ideas. This happened to me, as when I did the research on anti-angiogenic therapeutics, I found that they had severe limitations to the type of cancer I'd chosen. Now that in itself is fine. It's okay to write up a negative association. In fact, it's really important in science to report such results to avoid something called publication bias. However, it did mean I had to change the structure a bit and what I was planning to write. So it's best that I found this out before I started writing, instead of starting, then realize I had to change what I was going to say. I also found that sticking to a strict deadline helped me prevent wasting time and going down endless rabbit holes with the research. So for me, I was kind of forced to limit to myself because the summer I did the EP in, I had to also prepare for the UCAT and write my personal statement. Furthermore, planning and sticking to deadlines also helps you get AO1 marks, and you can write about this in your production log. When doing the more detailed research, be sure to use a range of resources. This helps you get the different types of content or ideas you can include in your project. It also helps you get AO2 marks. My personal preference of organizing research is just by having a massive Word document where I have the bibliography as a subtitle, then underneath I have the relevant bits of information from that source. This helped me when I was writing the project because I didn't have to keep searching for where I found the facts in my reference list because I knew what each source was giving me. I tended to just copy and paste from the sources rather than rewriting it in my own words because this saves time, and obviously when we are writing out the project, we will rewrite it in our own words, unless it's a direct quote, for example. Now I wanted to share some tips on how you can best locate niche articles that will be relevant to your project. A lot of this is optimizing the way we use search engines. There's a helpful article which I'll link down below for more information on this. But some examples include if you want to search for a specific phrase. Let's say I want to search tumor angiogenesis. If I put this in quotation marks around the term, then I only get results which has this exact phrase coming up. Another example is using and or functions by using capital letters for those words. And another point is be sure to use Control F or Command F for Mac users and use it prolifically to find your key term in the source. This will just save you so much time, and I honestly don't know what people did before we had Control F. Some databases like PubMed and JSTOR will allow you to do an advanced search. So you can search for different papers on the basis of particular authors, years, study types, and different journals. This will really narrow down your search so you get really just what's relevant to your title. Just be aware that some results which come up will be behind a paywall. However, they will give you an abstract, which is basically just a summary of the paper. This is often all you need, but if it's a really good or relevant paper which you want to read, For example, if you want to talk about the study methods in detail in your project, you could try asking your school or college if they had an institutional access which you could use. Many universities and hospital trusts also pay for access for many journals. So try asking around family and friends to see if they have any institutional access which you could borrow for your research. One really high-level skill for AO2 is to comment on the reliability of your sources. I'll link to this exceptional video which Dr. Shaene did on this, who's a doctor working in Oxford. But basically, some of the things you want to be aware of is the evidence pyramid for different types of studies. You could also comment on conflicts of interest or potential biases. For example, if you're doing a political project and reading a newspaper article, you could comment on which side of the political spectrum that the newspaper tends to lean on. And in science, if the authors have affiliations with like the pharmaceutical industry, that could also lead to bias. By the end of your research, you should be able to come up with a plan outlining the skeleton structure for your project, keeping in mind where all the relevant information is in your research document. Then you can get cracking on with writing your first draft. So that's all for this video. If you found it useful, please consider giving this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this in the future. You might want to check out my other videos in the EPQ series. I'm sure you'll find it helpful. Anyway, take care and bye for now.